What's up, Matrix? It's finally your time to shine. Life Sciences Wednesday. Yes. You're hanging out with Looney and Aslam. Hello, Aslam.
Hi.
Ooh, Aslam. And then
This is my strategy.
how are you, Aslam?
I'm fine. You can see I'm more loony than you are.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What are we doing for the message
Today we are talking about reproduction in vertebrates.
All right. So guys, you heard it. A very cool looking Aslam with a young flower on his chest, just having fun. We're doing reproduction and vertebrates. That's what we're doing.
There you go.
Yes. So hope you guys are going to enjoy the lesson. Remember to hit us up on Facebook and Twitter at LearnExtra. And then you can download the show notes, the videos, and check out our schedule on learn.mindset.co.za. Remember, guys, we do have the Test Yourself question competition going on. All you need to do is download the show notes, get the Test Yourself question section, answer your questions, fill in the entry form, and then submit it until 10 p.m. The entries are open, so you guys can submit after the show, just before 10 p.m., whenever, but 10 p.m. it's closing, it's gone, it's done. And then the winners will be announced on tomorrow's show. Congratulations to Mzimba Progress. You have won yourself 110 Rand Vodacom airtime. So if you want to be like Mzimba, make sure you do the Test Yourself questions, submit, and then watch tomorrow's show where I will announce a winner on all 3 shows. With that said, Aslam is going to give us the lesson.
Ish, and I just ran out of airtime just now.
Yes,
Vodacom
I
must answer those questions properly.
Yes.
I'm giving all the questions and no answers. Welcome, Mindsetters. Good Wednesday. We're starting with the real stuff now. We're talking about reproduction. I'm sure you're all excited and watching with much anticipation, but hold your horses. We're not yet at that topic yet. Next week. This week, let's see what we're doing this week. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? This is what we are doing. We want to review the schematic outline of the human life cycle. By the way, this is actually next week's work, but we've pushed it into today's work just so that we get a feel of it, so that when we get into next week's section, we know what we're talking about. I just felt it's important to know about this before we do other stuff. And we need to define sexual and asexual reproduction. And remember that this is not new work. You've done this in grade 11. It's no sense we're talking about sexual reproduction, but you don't know what sexual reproduction means. You don't know the advantages. You don't know how it differs from asexual reproduction. We need to know terms like copulation, fertilization, etc. How are these terms linked to what we're talking there? Thereafter, we want to describe the role of the following reproductive strategies. Which ones? These ones. External fertilization and internal ovipary, ovovivipary, and vivipary. That's a mouthful, I know. Amniotic egg, precocial and altricial development, and lastly, parental care, which shouldn't be too hard to understand. So those are the things that we need to look at. But before we go further, we need to ask ourselves, what is this big word that they're using, reproductive strategies? Because in its essence, this is all this topic is all about. It's about strategies. And if you have a strategy, what does that mean, Looney? If you have a strategy to do something.
You have a plan.
You have a plan, good. You have a plan which will try to make sure that you are successful. And strategy for reproduction, meaning that the animal has a plan to make sure that it would be able to mate, to produce offspring. Remember, the real purpose of reproduction is so that species can make more of themselves, so that that species doesn't die out, does not become extinct, so it can continue, continuation of the species. This is the main purpose of reproduction. I know you had other ideas about what reproduction should, or what the purpose of reproduction is. No, guys, we'll come to that later. But the real purpose is to make more. That does not mean now leave your stations, stop watching me, go out there and make more. No, that's not what we're saying either. We'll talk more about that next week. Good. Coming to our challenge question for today. Interesting question, by the way. I received this question from a learner on my Facebook page. And I told him, I referred him back to his grade 11. So I'm giving you the hint also. Go back to your grade 11 knowledge a little bit. And then I told him that I'm going to use this question. The question is, codfish produce a very large number of eggs. Plenty eggs. Yet, the population of cod in the sea remains fairly constant. Explain why this is so. It doesn't say state. It says explain. So you need to expand on what you say. Question 2, explain again the verb. Why the allantois and yolk sac are much reduced in mammals. In other words, if we simplify the question for you, explain why the allantois and yolk are so much smaller than in mammals than in the amniotic egg, which we're going to discuss a bit later. Good? Think about that. Food for thought. Our summary for today. Before we even look at that, guys, before we even look at our summary, before we look at those strategies, remember, for reproductive to happen, for success to happen in reproduction, there are many, many, many strategies that animals use, including courtship behavior. Even humans use some form of courtship behavior for reproduction. But we see it in other animals as well, in fish, in frogs, in birds. We see it in other mammals as well, where there's some form of courtship behavior before mating takes place. So there's a wide array of reproductive strategies. But remember that your exam guideline and the curriculum prescribe only a few. So while you are at liberty to learn 1,000 others, when you asked in the exam for reproductive strategies, you need to focus on the ones that are in your curriculum. The ones outside the curriculum will not earn you any marks. Remember that. While it is interesting to know that. So before you learn all those other things and you read about them, first learn what you need to know. Keep that in mind. Remember, I said it last week and the week before. The exam guideline is out. Your school should have it. Get it from your teachers. Get the exam guideline from your teachers. It serves for you a tool. Why? Number one, you can use it as a checklist to see, am I on track? What do I need to know from the textbook that's absolutely crucial? And what's extra? Secondly, you can also check with your teacher if he or she is still aligned to the old and they may be adding something extra, or worse, they're leaving something out. So you're checking it all the time. So make sure you have that guideline. Okay, so in terms of this reproduction and the strategies, in our case, I mean, Looney, what strategies do you think males or females in humans use to attract each other? Females, let's start with females. You should know about females.
What strategies females
use? Not you, right, but other females.
Yes.
What strategy would they use to attract a male?
Must first look good.
Okay, so dolling up, yeah?
Yes.
So dolling up, makeup. Okay, for me, that wouldn't be a reproductive strategy. I would look the other way once the woman uses makeup, all right? Okay, so I call it war paint.
Okay, war paint.
Yeah, war paint, yeah. Okay, that's one.
And then, like, you must be, you must present yourself well.
All right, presenting yourself good, so that's another strategy.
So now if you approach him.
In chemicals, what would you be using? Chemicals.
Chemicals, perfume.
To attract. There you go, perfume, yes?
Yes.
Although women say, or men also, men and women, before I get accused of gender bias, okay? Men and women, they say, I use the perfume to make myself feel nice. It's a lie. It's lying. It's for somebody else to say, hey, Looney, hey, you're smelling nice today. And from there,
but apparently now James says these days it's Facebook. So you hit him up on Facebook.
You don't have to use chemicals.
Young chat.
You just poke them in Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook.
Well, sooner or later, the whole reproduction will take place on Facebook, in cyberspace. I'm worried about that time, how the baby's going to come out then. Okay, so guys, why I'm using this example, just to make you understand what we mean by the strategy. Now let's look at the other animals quickly. And the vertebrates, we're looking at vertebrates here in this more than anything else. First of all, among the vertebrates, we have internal and external fertilization. Obviously internal, inside, internal, external, outside. So fertilization can happen inside the body, and inside doesn't mean inside the house or inside the room. Inside means the fertilization takes place inside the body. And if we're explaining it, we mustn't just say fertilization. We must say that the gametes or the sperm and the egg fuse inside. Generally, it would be inside the female's body, okay, or outside. And generally, if it's outside, it takes place in water. Water is essential for external fertilization. Then we look at these things here, and this is now about the development of the zygote. That means the zygote, when the sperm and egg fuse, what happens to them? Are do they form eggs with shells or membranes around them, and they laid and develop outside? That means the minute fertilization takes place, the egg then forms the shell and the membranes, etc., and it's laid, then it's ovipary or oviparous. If the egg, this should be inside, all right? And the eggs with shells develop inside and then are laid. Sorry about that. And then are laid. Then it's ovovivipary. And the last one is when the young are born, like you and I, good examples. Then it's vivipary. Then we move on to the amniotic egg. So organisms create this amniotic egg as a reproductive strategy to make sure that the young develop and indeed can then reproduce. We talk of an amniotic egg that has an eggshell with 3 membranes. We'll talk more about that later. Then after these eggs hatch or the young are born, the development of the young offspring can either be precocial or altricial. Let me take it out. I am blocking your view. Let's do it this way. Precocial or altricial. Precocious, the verb precocious, or sorry, the adjective, precocious, used to describe some person that is forward. Voor op die wa in Afrikaans they say. Precocial. And in what we are talking about that the young that are born, they are fairly independent. That means they have feathers or fur on their body, which can keep them warm, and they can see, and they are fairly mobile. That means they can move around. So even if they left alone, they can fend for themselves. And altricial means when the young is born, it lacks in the birds feathers, or in mammals or other vertebrates, it lacks a body covering that is protective, and usually they cannot see when they are born or they hatch. So obviously if you can't see, you can't do anything. Altricial, by the way, even though we are more the so-called higher order organisms, when we are born, we are altricial. We are totally dependent on our parents initially, otherwise we would die. Okay, good. The last one is parental care. Guys, that's easy. That's more LO than life science. Parental care talks about when the young hatch or they are born, does the parent take care of this young or not? This is what we are talking about. So it's either absent or present. If it's absent, there's certain consequences. If it's present, there's certain consequences. And we have to look at all of these things and also look at what the advantages and disadvantages of all these things are as well. The questions we're going to discuss after the break will take us through these sections again. With that,
all right.
Looney.
Hello there, Martinique, Bongiwe, Noble, Gatsby, Joanna, Lugumka, Wenzi, Lori, and yes, those are the metrics. Hello guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's take a quick break and we'll see you straight after this. Hello there, Mindsetters. Welcome back. Wenzy's asking me to say hello to her. Yes, it's a her. To her lovely sister, Tali. And then Bongi was asking me to say hello to the grade 12s of Rifeng Tabo Secondary School. We love you guys a lot. Thank you so much, Mindsetters, for saying hello, for asking questions and everything. Asla.
Thanks, Looney. Let's carry on. Thank you, Mindsetters, for keeping in touch with us. We like your comments and we want you to be on the page. The human life cycle. Remember we said in the beginning that we need to look at that as well. Just very briefly. Obviously, humans, we look at the adults first. Oops, let's take that out. And let's use that. The adults first are diploid. Remember in meiosis we spoke about diploid and haploid. So the organism diploid, multicellular organisms that are diploid, the male has testes and the female has ovaries. And in those testes and ovaries, meiosis takes place. In the female, an egg is produced. In the male, a sperm is produced. And when reproduction does take place, these two will fuse. And the process where the male sperm and the egg fuse is known as fertilization. Do not confuse that with copulation. Copulation means the male deposits sperms into the female's body. It doesn't guarantee that fertilization will take place. So fertilization is when these two things, not two things, these two gametes fuse. That is fertilization. Guys, I cannot overstress the need for you to understand the terminology. One is to learn the terminology. When you learn it as a parrot, and you just say, this is fertilization. Fertilization means this, 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 and that. But you don't understand what it means. You're going to forget it because you are actually setting yourself up in the following, what I call learning to forget. You are not learning to remember. You are learning for an exam. You're learning for a test. You must learn to understand. Once you understand it, it's within you always. You just need to revise thereafter. So keep that in mind. So when fertilization takes place, notice the term given here. The resultant cell is a diploid cell. It's a diploid zygote. This is in all organisms. The zygote is not a new thing. You've learned it in plant reproduction as well in grade 11. So it's not a new thing. And from there, mitosis will take place, and this diploid zygote will, imagine this diploid cell becomes one of these two, a male or a female, depending on what happened in fertilization, which we'll talk about in genetics, what will determine whether it's a male or a female. But that is basically, I mean, how difficult is this to understand? This is just a life cycle, and this life cycle can be adapted for any animal or plant you study. You just use a cycle to show how things happen. That's all we're doing here, nothing more. Look at it here now. Here we have the adults, fish in this case. They also diploid. Meiosis takes place again in testes and ovaries in different fish. Egg, sperm. Fusion or fertilization takes place, zygote. Because this is going to happen in the water, generally it is external fertilization. Generally, I said. Remember that there are exceptions to the rule. And from there, the zygote is going to become a small fish, which we call fry sometimes. And these fry then will undergo mitosis, and they will grow because they have all the basic structures. They're just smaller than the adults, and they become adults, and the cycle continues. That is all I wanted to show you in that particular story. Let's go to the questions, guys. This is where our fun starts. First question says, study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. Obviously, by looking at the diagram, you know that this is a diagram that is showing the amniotic egg. That's what we are seeing here. And guys, now this again is not something new. In grade 3 or 4 or 5, or all three of those grades, you had to draw the bird's egg. That's what we're talking about here. An example of the amniotic egg that we do is generally a bird's egg. Okay? So nothing difficult about it. Remember, you need to be able to draw this. When you're drawing, remember that your lines must be solid. You do not sketch. That's sketching. When you put your pen down, you must draw a solid line. That's drawing in life science, okay? So make sure you're doing that. Also make sure that you have a caption for your drawing. This one doesn't have a caption here because they're asking you questions about it. But you must have a caption. Your label lines must not cross. Can you see there's label lines all over this diagram? But none of the label lines are crossing, okay? And you must label those things that are prescribed in the syllabus. Good. Let's move on. Identify the membranes numbered 1, 2, and 4. Number 1 there, 2 is that one, and 4 there, okay? The 4 is a bit off there. because it's supposed to be, say, part 4 there, sorry. Amnion, the chorion, and the air space there. Number 4 is the air space. Good. Provide the functions found, functions of the fluid found in part 1. We labeled 1 as the amnion, and you'll notice that the amnion has amniotic fluid. So the fluid that is found there is amniotic fluid, and we want to know the functions of the amniotic fluid, and that's easy. It protects the embryo during development. In the humans, we go further with the functions of the amniotic fluid. More about that, not next week, but the following week. Provide a number that represents the allantois in this diagram, and that will be number 3. This one here, allantois. You can see it's quite large in the bird's egg. Okay. What is the function of the allantois? What is the function of the allantois? Remember, you've done this work before. What is the function of the allantois? Yep, that's what it is. It helps to store waste and dispose of that waste. In other words, in one word, excretion. But try and say this as it is there. Explain the differences between viviparous and oviparous embryo development. Now, when we talk about this, we must first understand these words, and we did that in a summary. Try to use just one word to, one or two words to keep in your mind the differences. And again, in viviparous, you keep live young, right? And in oviparous, you talk about egg laying. But remember, with egg laying, there is a catch, because there are 2 types of egg laying in what we call in this section. One is where the egg stays inside the body until it's ready to hatch, oviparous, and the other one is ovoviviparous. That means, hello, vivi is coming from young that are born alive, and ovo, there's an egg. In viviparous, there's no real egg as such. The organism develops as an embryo inside the mother's body, and then it is born. But in ovoviviparous, there is an egg, but the egg remains inside the body of the female until it is ready to hatch. And just when it's ready to hatch, the female will lay the egg and the egg will hatch. In the time when the egg is inside the female's body, there is no connection between the mother and the developing embryo. The nourishment for that developing embryo is in the egg. You must understand that. So we need to show the difference here. And what is that difference? Viviparous, the embryo develops inside the uterus. Placenta usually nourishes the embryo, and the female gives birth to live young. When gestation, by the way, another name for another word for pregnancy. Gestation, pregnancy. So can you see there's 3 levels to that answer? One is develops inside the body. Secondly, it's getting nourishment from the placenta. And thirdly, when it is born, it's born alive. Let's go to the next one. Oviparous, eggs with shells are laid outside the female's body into a nest and continue to develop in the egg. We should say the embryo continues to develop in the egg, hatching when development is complete. So the minute fertilization is finished and the egg is fertilized and so on, the bird especially, and fish and other organisms sometimes, if there's internal fertilization, will lay the egg. And this development will take place outside the body. Briefly explain the meaning of the terms precocial young. Precocial young. Remember what I said, forward. And for forward, are young, the young are mature and able to move directly after birth or hatching. They are fairly independent after that. Why? Because they can see, let's write that down, because they can see, and they have some form of body covering. That, and they can move. They are mobile. So they can fend for themselves. And altricial young, the opposite of that one, the young are helpless. The young are born helpless. they cannot protect, they cannot feed themselves, generally they cannot see, and they lack hair in mammals and hair or fur, sorry, and or feathers in birds. Okay? I'm hoping we're on the same page here, guys. Now, the next question says, should have said, study the diagrams below in an exam question, but I can read it. So, study the diagrams below and answer the questions that follow. So, they're giving you 4 diagrams. Here, something happening in this diagram. Let's put some other color here so we can see it. No, no good. Yeah, this one there's something happening there. That's A. B is this one here. You see a little young chick coming from an egg there. And C, you got a dog with its litter there. And D, frog laying eggs. In fact, not just laying eggs, a little bit more than laying eggs there. The female is laying the eggs, the male is on top of the female there, and something's happening there. Provide the letter of the diagram above that depicts internal fertilization. Where in these 4 diagrams does internal fertilization come? I mean, some of the things were clues already. And the answer here could have been A, B, or C. A, B, and C, by the way. B also, it can happen in birds. We can also include B there. And B. Oviparity. That means egg is laid outside the body and the young develop from there. And that would be B or D. Altricial development. That means the young are born helpless. There, or there. Which one is it? It will be C. Yeah, the dogs. In most of these others, the young have to take care of themselves anyway because there's no parental care. And in this one here, the answer is given to us by the fact that this bird has a body covering. Oops. Body covering there, and the eyes are open so they can see. Provide the disadvantages of the type of fertilization shown in D. Okay, that's the other side of this whole thing on internal, external fertilization, ovovipary and ovovivipary, and precocial and altricial. We must be able to discuss the advantages and disadvantages. So what are the disadvantages of the type of fertilization there? Firstly, we must identify the type of fertilization, and that would be external fertilization. Fertilization in the water. What's so wrong about it? So what was it? Advantages? Disadvantages. So what's wrong with that type of a fertilization? That's easy, guys. You know, general knowledge can tell you what can go wrong with external fertilization. The fact that it's not taking place inside the body, that means there's no guarantee that this fertilization will take place. Because what's happening in external fertilization? The female lays the eggs in the water, the male deposits his sperm in the water with the hope that the eggs and the sperms will fuse. Once it's inside the body, the chances of egg and female, they're in one small area. The chance of them meeting are obviously great. Can you see that's an advantage of internal? But it becomes a disadvantage of external fertilization because here there's no guarantee. At the same time, we can then look at others as well. Eggs and sperms are exposed to the harsh environment, firstly, because the environment is bad. It can be drought or whatever, cold temperatures can drop or rise, or whatever, that can take them, can destroy the eggs. Or they can be also exposed to predators. In fact, in some of these, the eggs and especially the eggs can become preyed upon by their own kind as well. Provide the advantages of the type of development, altricial or precocial, depicted in diagram B. Diagram B. Okay, there. First of all, in this question, you needed to identify whether this is altricial or precocial, and then you needed to take it to the level of an advantage of that type of development, whichever one it is. And there we go. Firstly, the young that are born, or hatch in this case, are relatively mature. Include to that, you can say they have a body covering to maintain their temperature, and their eyes are open so they can see and they are aware of their environment. Thirdly, they are mobile so they can move around. What's so good about this? That means if something had to happen to the parents, this young should be able to take care of themselves within time. Obviously, it wouldn't be able to fend itself against predators and that, but within a controlled environment, this young would be able to survive more than others. Okay? What are the advantages of the amniotic egg shown in diagram B and D? The amniotic egg in B and D, what are the advantages of having amniotic egg? Can you see that we are now exploring the other side of this question? One is you need to know the differences or explain what each of these terms mean, internal, fertilizing, external. Then you need to say how is it advantageous or disadvantageous to a particular organism. So what are advantages of the amniotic egg shown in diagram B and D? Come on, guys, that's simple stuff. And that would be, first of all, that they are resistant to dryness. That's the first thing, because they have a shell and membranes and fluid inside there to make them resistant to dryness. Or a bigger word, they are resistant to dehydration. Resistant to, so they won't dry up, in other words, that's what we are saying. Okay? They are protected by a number of membranes. So apart from just being protected against dryness, they are protected from the environment as well with these different membranes. At the same time, these membranes, they have the necessary structures to help in the nourishment and excretion. The different membranes, etc., and other structures in the egg. Remember, we spoke about allantoids, we spoke about the yolk, etc. They provide nourishment. The yolk provides nourishment. Albumin provides nourishment. The excretion is taken care of by the allantoids. The chalaza holds the embryo in place. The fluid inside the amniotic, the amnion, it acts as a shock absorber, etc. All of those things can help. And because the structure is so complicated, and because it is so protective, it allows animals to evolve into bigger forms and better protect themselves. Because the egg is protecting the embryo. The most vulnerable part of an animal, vertebrate animal's life is when it's in the embryonic stage, because it is prone to be harmed by the environmental factors, etc. These are things that can happen there. Okay, let's just go back up to the diagram again. Remember, in a diagram like this, they can show you these diagrams and ask you. Let's just quickly look at internal fertilization and its advantages. What are the advantages of internal fertilization? I told you earlier. Number one, it's taking place inside the body. Therefore, there is some degree of guarantee that the egg and sperm would meet. Secondly, the resultant zygote or embryo would be protected from the harsh environment and or predators in the mother's body. I'm going to do the internal fertilization. You can work out the others as you go along, because you've done it in school as well. Can you see how we're explaining it, though? And you move further with that type of a thing. All right? Good. What am I doing? Going backwards. The last question, name and describe 6 different strategies that animals use to ensure reproductive success in different environments. I want you to think about this during the break. As soon as we come back after the break, we answer this, we go back to the challenge question, and then we take your questions, mindsetters.
All right. Hello there, Tashi Banele, Simane, Jessica Musa, Selo, and Bungio. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's take a quick break, and after the break, we'll do the challenge question. Welcome back, mindsetters, from the break. Just a quick little something from Aslam. He's very sad that you guys didn't comment on his beautiful headpiece, the flower. He's accessorizing here, guys, and you don't even notice. Be very hurt. Anyway. Aslam.
Okay, you ready for me?
Yes.
Okay. Guys, well, Today we're in a flowery mood. Okay, so you had time to think about it. What are we asking in this particular essay, if it was an essay anyway? We're simply asking you to name the strategies that we've just discussed and explain them. Name and describe them. Remember, this thing could go further. Name, describe, and explain the advantages or the disadvantages of 3, of 2, of any one of those. Can you see the combinations that we can have here? So in other words, for you now to make this learning easier for you, put the strategies on a double page, write the name of the strategy in the first column. The second column, explain very briefly in a couple of words. Remember, don't write the whole textbook out there, then you're wasting time. Simply just jot the important things that are going to remind you of this thing. Give some examples, because it can ask you for examples. And then you talk about advantages and disadvantages. Simple, done, one table, you got this thing covered. That's all you need in this section, okay? So what did we have to do? Remember again, whenever we do a so-called essay question, remember this is not a true essay question, but we're calling it an essay question. We could look at the verbs, name and describe. What comes after these 2 verbs? 6 different strategies that animals use to ensure reproductive success. Provide suitable examples of each. Can you see how detailed it can become? All right? Remember, the section itself doesn't carry so many marks in the exam. Look at your exam guideline. I think I stand to be corrected. It's about 6 marks. So it won't be asked as a total essay like this. It can't be, because it's only 6 marks there. It's obvious. Okay. Nonetheless, let's see. All we are doing here is we are revising what we've done already. External, internal fertilization. All right, so let's just go straight to the chase, cut to the chase. External fertilization, the egg, and some of these are going to answer some of your questions as well as we go through it very quickly. Egg cell and sperm cell fuse outside of the female's body. Notice I don't say fertilization taking place outside the body. Because there's two words that are given here, external and the word fertilization. So when you're explaining it, you're explaining what external means, outside the body, and you're explaining what fertilization means. Okay, and you wouldn't have to do it all over after that, because you've said it already once in this particular question. But we've done it right through. Egg cells are generally inside the egg structures. The female lays her eggs, and the female deposits its sperm cells over the eggs. Okay? Examples are frogs and many species of fish. Not all the fish, but some of them. Okay? Internal fertilization, the same story, but inside the female's body. That's the difference between internal fertilization. Remember, inside means, or internal means inside the female's body, and external means outside the body. And generally, outside the body means in water, because water is essential for that fertilization. Otherwise, how would the sperm get to the egg? Examples are reptiles, as we saw the tortoises there, birds, and mammals. Some fish species as well. Viviparous and oviparous and ovoviviparous, we explain each one. We're not going to go through each one of those. That's what we are saying there. We're telling you what it is and the examples. Oviparous, telling you what it is and the examples. Ovoviviparous, telling you what it is and the example. We've done this before, by the way. Amniotic egg, the amniotic egg has a porous, leathery, or hard eggshell to prevent the egg from dying out. I'm just going to this one because we didn't discuss it in more detail earlier. Okay? So the amniotic egg has a porous, leathery, or hard eggshell to prevent the egg from dehydration. Examples are frogs and many species of fish and birds. All the birds. Most of the birds, anyway. Then we talk about precocial. Remember, in the amniotic egg, one is you must be able to explain it like this, and you must be able to draw the diagram or label a given diagram of the amniotic egg. Okay, and in all, you must be able to give the advantages and the disadvantages. Precocial, young are mature and able to move directly after birth or hatching, able to fend for themselves and feed without parental care. That's important, and feed without parental care. For example, insects, Remember when the locusts, the mosquitoes, the butterflies, when they lay their eggs, they leave them and they go away. They don't come back and say, hello, hello, my child, how are you doing? They leave them and they move on. Those insects, when they hatch from the eggs, they fend for themselves. Fish, also in the water, amphibians, frogs, etc., reptiles, snakes, lizards, etc. Also, once the egg hatches, it must do its own thing. Okay? Not the egg, the organism that comes from there, right? Some bird species, like ducks, chickens, geese, and plovers, are precocial as well. Altricial, helpless, cannot protect or feed themselves or fend for themselves. Bird species like doves, finches, hawks, and eagles, and all mammals are altricial. They're dependent on their parents initially. Parental care, here now, parental care, again, we explained this when we were doing the definition, the summary at the beginning. What are we saying there? The parents look after the offspring to provide comfort, warmth, nourishment, and protection. This can't be a rocket science, because you should know what your parents did for you. Examples are insect, no. Okay, yeah, the examples, insects, fish, amphibians, and reptiles, no parental care. I thought I wrote something nonsense there. There's no parental care. Okay, precocial and altricial birds have parental care. Both of them have a degree of parental care. And mammals have long periods of protective nurturing when social behavior and survival techniques are taught. Now, again, we don't have to look far to the dogs and the cats and the rest of it. You look at yourself. How long are you dependent on your mom, especially? On both your parents, but more so your mom. Okay? As an embryo, you're dependent totally on your mom, because you're getting your nourishment from your mom, you're getting all those things, the excretion is taking place via the mom, etc. Okay? When you are born, you're feeding from the mom. She's making sure you're getting fed, etc. The minute you're crying, she's turning over, or they take turns, your father and your mother take turns to look after you, to put you off to sleep if you are feeding from the bottle, and so on. So, a degree of parental care. The degree of parental care is proportional to the chances of survival. The higher the parental care, the higher the chances that the offspring will survive. The lower the degree of parental care, or where parental care is absent, there's a less chance of the offspring to survive. Let's go to your challenge question. The challenge question was that codfish produce a lot of eggs. How come they don't overpopulate? That's what it means in real terms. And we've seen many answers posted there, and let's see if your answer is correct. First of all, and again, I've just put a small summary there because we're going to discuss it. First of all, they display external fertilization. That's one. So there's no guarantee that all the eggs are fertilized. Secondly, what I just told you earlier about parental care, if you bring in your grade 11 work now, you will say that they are R strategy species. And that means there's very low or no parental care. Therefore, they lay many eggs in the hope, number one, that at least some of them will be fertilized. And number two, those that get fertilized in the hope that among these thousands of eggs, at least some won't get eaten by predators and they will survive. And therefore, the cycle continues. Now, we can bring the ecological dimension also in here. We can also talk about, in a very open way, but remember, because we're talking about reproduction, we restrict our answer to this. Try and keep that in mind as well. But in the environmental factor, we can bring in that these fish are being preyed upon, overpreyed, overexploited by man, and therefore, it's keeping the numbers also down. Remember that. But this question is not dealing with the ecological impact. We're talking about in terms of this reproductive strategy. So your answer must be related to the reproductive strategy. And that is the type of fertilization and the degree of parental care. That gives you your answer. Can you see how it's sort of a higher order question, but we already learned this under the disadvantage of external fertilization. We said that there's no guarantee that fertilization takes place. There's the answer there. So it's from your work, but they didn't ask you what is the disadvantage of external fertilization. They've given you the disadvantage of the external fertilization. They wanted to see whether you can pick that out. And further, you studied about parental care, and you know that if there's a high degree of parental care, there's a greater chance of survival. So you know that. They didn't ask you for that advantage. Rather, they made it a disadvantage, and they asked you about the disadvantages of no parental care. And you needed to see that and extract that information. Explain why the allantois and yolk sac are much reduced in mammals. First of all, we must look at those two structures, and we must know what their functions are, the allantois and the yolk sac. Allantois, excretory waste products are stored there. A yolk sac, mainly for nourishment. Now, in mammals, they are, firstly, internal fertilization and viviparous. In other words, this embryo develops inside the body with a connection via the umbilical cord and the placenta to the mother. And in doing so, it receives nourishment from the mother, so no need for a big yolk sac. And it releases its waste products by diffusion via the mother out the body. So why must we store waste products then? Okay, so let's look at what we have as an answer there. Okay. Okay, this must have jumped in from somewhere else. This one here is, by the way, here's our other answer that I wrote out for you. This answer here, remember, I said low degree of parental care, so there you have that with your R strategy that just jumped into this block. Sorry about that. Okay. Developing embryo receives nourishment from the mother via the placenta. I just told you that now. And excretory waste products are also diffused via the placenta from the fetus to the mother. Thus, there is less need for these structures in mammals. Now, we had a similar question about this, Luni. I don't know if you remember it or if you can see it there. Are you seeing your questions now?
Yes, I'm looking at the questions.
There was one about why are the structures in the mammals.
Why does the developing mammalian fetus
There
have
you
so
go.
many similar structures to the embryonic
Why does
egg?
the name of the person?
It's both Kanyisa and Jessica. It was two people asked the same
Jessica and Kanisa.
Yes.
Okay, Jessica and Kanisa want to know. Maybe they from the same school, and maybe it was asked in their test. They want to know why does the mammalian embryo have so many similar structures, like the amnion, like the chorion, like the yolk sac and amnion as the amniotic egg. Now, this question is actually more linked to your section on evolution than it is to reproduction. The evolutionists, the scientists that believe in evolution, or the scientists that postulate the theory of evolution, they say that since they are all vertebrates, they share the same ancestor. And because they share the same ancestors, these are signs that they have the similar structures developing all the time. Although that section on embryology as evidence for evolution is now out of the syllabus because there have been flaws in the way the diagrams were drawn. But that's where we're going with that question. Any other questions there?
Yes, this is from Prishka. If a baby is fertilized in a lab and is developed outside the female body, is it vivipary? Please explain.
The question wants to know if a baby, human baby I'm assuming, is fertilized in a lab. That means in vitro fertilization is taking place. That means the woman, or there's problems with the man or the woman, which we will discuss later, and they have to fertilize. They're getting the sperm from the father, and they take the egg from the female, and we call them test tube. In a test tube or in a lab condition, we bring the egg and sperm together and culture it until there's development of the zygote further, and then we implant that into the mother's body. Now, that's where the question comes. Is it still viviparous? Did we say in viviparous that it has to be internal fertilization? For a start, remember this is an exception to the rule because it's not natural. There's an unnatural process of outside the body. That's number one. But more importantly, when this embryo develops, do we leave this embryo in the test tube to develop and then pop out of the embryo, out of the test tube comes a baby, Looney? That won't happen, isn't it? What do we do with this embryo? We implant this embryo into the mother's body in the same way that a fertilized egg would have been implanted. Therefore, from that point on, there is a connection between the mother and the developing embryo. Nourishment, etc., takes place inside the body with connection from the mother, and this particular young is still going to be born alive from the mother. So definitely it is vivipary.
Okay, and then from Kani, what is required for both external and internal fertilization to occur?
I'm not understanding the question. What is required for both internal and external fertilization to occur? You have to look at them separately. For external fertilization to take place, there must be water. It has to take place in water because otherwise the sperm will not reach the egg. That's important. And obviously, the sperm must be motile because otherwise, how does the sperm get to the egg, even if it's in water? If we just drop a sperm and the sperm can't move in water, no sense. We're hoping that it falls on the egg and fertilization takes place. It doesn't happen like that. The sperm moves towards the egg. For internal fertilization to take place, there have to be specialized organs to deposit the sperm into the female's body. Some textbooks use that as a disadvantage because now the organism has to have a special organ to deposit the sperm into the female's body. But it's necessary. Otherwise, how does the sperm get into the female's body? In this case also, the sperm still has to be motile. It must be able to move. Motile means it can move. And therefore, it has a tail, etc., which will enable it to swim towards the egg. So you need those things. If you're asking for that, I'm hoping that answers your question. If it does, give us a thumbs up on the page because you can't look at internal and external to happen together. It's not going to happen. It's either internal or external. So you're looking for requirements for internal and requirements for external fertilization. Any more?
Yes, Slengi was asking, why are the eggs of a reptile leathery?
The eggs of the what a question. And I would have been knocked off my socks. Normally. But where does the egg of the reptile develop? Inside the body. Now think about this egg. If it was a hard shell inside the body, would it be able to grow inside the body? No, because it was broken. And think about when this reptile is laying this egg. It's after all these things are happening and it's developing inside. If it's laying this egg and this egg is shelly, the egg will break as it's moving through the particular, through the birth canal as such, cloaca in this case here. In this way, it's leathery, so it can move without breaking. Wow, what a question.
Yes.
What a question to end.
It's time.
Thank you, guys. Well done.
It's time.
Go to you, Looney. Looney is
time.
calling me time out.
Time.
And I just started having fun.
Thank you, Aslam, for the great lesson. Mindsetters, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. From us, it is a goodbye. What's up, Matrix? It's finally your time to shine. Life Sciences, Wednesday. Yes. You're hanging out with Looney and Aslam. Hello, Aslam.
Hi, Looney.
Ooh, Aslam. And then...
This is my strategy.
How are you, Aslam?
I'm fine. You can see I'm more loony than you are.
Yeah, oh my gosh. What are we doing for the mindset?
Today, we are talking about reproduction in vertebrates.
All right. So, guys, you heard it. A very cool-looking Aslam with a young flower on his chest, just having fun. We're doing reproduction and vertebrates. That's what we're doing.
There you go.
Yes. So hope you guys are going to enjoy the lesson. Remember to hit us up on Facebook and Twitter at Learn Extra. And then you can download the show notes, the videos, and check out our schedule on learn.mindset.co.za. Remember, guys, we do have the Test Yourself question competition going on. All you need to do is download the show notes, get the Test Yourself question section, answer your questions, fill in the entry form, and then submit it until 10 p.m.
It's about strategies. And if you have a strategy, what does that mean, Looney? If you have a strategy to do something.
You have a plan.
You have a plan, good. You have a plan which will try to make sure that you are successful. And strategy for reproduction, meaning that the animal has a plan to make sure that it would be able to mate, to produce offspring. Remember, the real purpose of reproduction is so that species can make more of themselves, so that that species doesn't die out, does not become extinct, so it can continue, continuation of the species. This is the main purpose of reproduction. I know you had other ideas about what reproduction should, or what the purpose of reproduction is. No, guys, we'll come to that later. But the real purpose is to make more. That does not mean now leave your stations, stop watching me, go out there and make more. No, that's not what we're saying either. We'll talk more about that next week. Good. Coming to our challenge question for today. Interesting question, by the way. I received this question from a learner on my Facebook page. And I told him, I referred him back to his grade 11. So I'm giving you the hint also. Go back to your grade 11 knowledge a little bit. And then I told him that I'm going to use this question. The question is, codfish produce a very large number of eggs. Plenty eggs. Yet, the population of cod in the sea remains fairly constant. Explain why this is so. It doesn't say state. It says explain. So you need to expand on what you say. Question 2, explain again the verb. Why the allantois and yolk sac are much reduced in mammals. In other words, if we simplify the question for you, explain why the allantois and yolk are so much smaller than in mammals than in the amniotic egg, which we're going to discuss a bit later. Good? Think about that. Food for thought. Our summary for today. Before we even look at that, guys, before we even look at our summary, before we look at those strategies, remember, for reproductive to happen, for success to happen in reproduction, there are many feel of it, so that when we get into next week's section, we know what we're talking about. I just felt it's important to know about this before we do other stuff. And we need to define sexual and asexual reproduction. And remember that this is not new work. You've done this in grade 11. It's no sense we're talking about sexual reproduction, but you don't know what sexual reproduction means. You don't know the advantages. You don't know how it differs from asexual reproduction. We need to know terms like copulation, fertilization, etc. How are these terms linked to what we're talking there? Thereafter, we want to describe the role of the following reproductive strategies. Which ones? These ones. External fertilization and internal ovipary, ovovivipary, and vivipary. That's a mouthful, I know. Amniotic egg, precocial and altricial development. And lastly, parental care, which shouldn't be too hard to understand. So those are the things that we need to look at. But before we go further, we need to ask ourselves, what is this big word that they're using, reproductive strategies? Because in its essence, this is all this topic is all about.
The entries are open, so you guys can submit after the show, just before 10 p.m., whenever, but 10 p.m., it's closing, it's gone, it's done. And then the winners will be announced on tomorrow's show. Congratulations to Mzimba Progress. You have won yourself 110 Rand Vodacom airtime. So if you want to be like Mzimba, make sure you do the Test Yourself questions, submit, and then watch tomorrow's show where I will announce a winner on all 3 shows. With that said, Aslam is going to give us the lesson.
Ish, and I just ran out of airtime just now.
Yes, you know, Vodacom
I
must
must answer those
up.
questions properly.
Yes.
I'm giving all the questions and no answers. Welcome, Mindsetters. Good Wednesday. We're starting with the real stuff now. We're talking about reproduction. I'm sure you're all excited, watching with much anticipation. But hold your horses. We're not yet at that topic yet. Next week. This week, let's see what we're doing this week. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? This is what we are doing. We want to review the schematic outline of the human life cycle. By the way, this is actually next week's work, but we've pushed it into today's work just so that we get a